Hi, and welcome to StoryBee. I'm Frances Dow, and today I am talking with Vikki Pignatelli, the world-renowned art quilter, teacher, award winner, and the founder of Sacred Threads, which is very much on my mind because we just saw this amazing exhibit this summer outside of DC. Vikki is known, especially I think, for her use of color in her quilts. I think that when I look at Vikki's quilts, they're exhilarating, they're exciting, they're full of energy, and it's really just an honor and a thrill to be talking to you. And we will be looking at some of your quilts, which is especially exciting. So welcome to StoryBee, Vikki. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Oh, Frances, thank you so much for your kind words. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I want to get right into the heart of what I see at the heart of your work, which is a really deep creativity and spirituality. And I feel that your work is deeply spiritual. And I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the spiritual lives of quilts. And what is, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I want you to talk about it, about quilts and spirituality and what you are expressing through your quilts.
Well, I believe that every person has so many gifts and talents and abilities to create. And these are all spiritual gifts from the divine creator. Mm-hmm. And we can use these gifts in a number of ways. We can use them for our employment. We can use them for survival. We can use them for our enjoyment. But when you use them to touch others in certain ways, it becomes a form of worship. It becomes almost like prayer. And when you choose to bring yourself out and into your work and put your passion and your love and your heart and your soul into your work, it has the ability to touch and move others in ways that are just amazing. And what you're doing is all the spirituality that is within you, you're conveying that to other spirits and other souls. And it just has so much power, and can motivate people. It can heal. It can just do so many things. It can give comfort. It's just something that I've always done. When you work from within, what is in you comes out. And particularly if you want to express your passion to others, you use those thoughts and what are in you. And a lot of my spirituality started in my work after my husband's bout with cancer back in '95. And I felt this need to express, I would now call it a healing quilt. At the time, I had no clue what that was. I was a brand new quilter. And I wanted to feel that healing coming out of me. And that's what started it. Actually, Breaking Point was my very first spiritual work. And that's because I was letting myself come out and into my work. And it was healing.
Yeah. Do you feel like when other people saw that quilt that they experienced what you put into it? Do you feel like that quilt communicated those feelings?
Absolutely, because when an artist, a true artist, puts themselves into their work, you can feel that passion. You can see it in their body. You can see it in their spirit. Take, for instance, someone who's playing the violin, another beautiful creative, endeavor. If you can see, there's the difference between someone who plays notes and someone who puts their passion and their heart in it. You can see it on the expression on their face. And the same is true with artwork. You can feel it. And I had so many people tell me that they could feel the angst. They could feel the sadness and the anxiety that was coming through in that quilt.
One thing that really interests me about your work, I mean, it's so beautiful and it's so expressive. But from reading your biography, and you did a Quilter Save Our Stories interview many years ago, you were creative as a young person, but you weren't really an artist. And I'm curious about your journey, particularly because you talk about the quilt that you made after your husband's illness, and that was in '95. You had not been quilting long. So I'm curious about how you went from sort of one of just, basically creative, but not really artistically expressive, to a quilt maker, to an art quilt maker. Can you talk about that journey a little bit?
Well, you can be, as I said, a true artist puts their heart and their soul in it. They become lost in their work. They lose total track of time, which I had done. I'd start in the morning, and before I knew it, it was 4 o'clock, and I'd think, where did the time go? There were times that I was totally oblivious to what I was doing and making these choices. It seemed like the energy was coming from me, but I wasn't aware of it. It was really kind of freaky in a lot of ways. But I had no real knowledge of the technical aspects. And I pretty much taught myself because I wanted to do curves. And I tried looking up and finding the conventional ways to do that. And I wasn't able to do it. And I thought there's got to be a better way. And so I started my own trial and error and came into my own journey, which then I began to teach. So this kind of snowballed, and it was something that I always believed was meant to be. It was something that I was supposed to do. And it took me I was 46 years old before this ever started, so it took me that long. Before that, I was always a creative. I always loved doing creative things, but my heart and my passion wasn't into it. With this, my heart and my passion started to get into it, and then it just snowballed into what it did.
What were your early quilts like? Were they more traditional quilts?
Well, I took a class, and only after my sister dragged me to a quilting class, because I all but flunked out of home ec because of sewing. I mean, sewing was not my thing, and which is so ironic that I taught quilting all those years. But it was a means to an end to get to the art part, which I always did love. So yeah, when I first started, I did some traditional things, the first 2, but then I said, I don't want to do anybody else's work. I've got too many other ideas, things that I want to do. And so that's when I went off and said, now I'm on my own. I'm going to design my own work, and I'm going to make what I want to make.
And did you just follow your own path? Did you take art classes? It's just your work is so accomplished, and your use of color, and you just sort of followed your own path to get there.
I did. I did not have art classes. Everything from it was a gift, a divine gift, I say. And I got C's in art in junior high school. I never took art. I mean, that was not my, thing, but I did my own creative thing. And I love color. I used to be afraid of color, and I was afraid I wouldn't get the colors right. And then one day I was walking, and this is kind of what did it. I was walking, taking a walk, and it was after a rain, and there was a tree as I was walking, and because of the rain, it was so saturated color, so the trunk looked black, but there was a green moss, a blue-green moss glowing on one side, and a yellow-green right next to it on top of it. Now, normally these colors you would not mix, a blue-green and a yellow-green, because they would clash. They were stunning on this tree. I thought, if God can create this beautiful and use all these colors, I can do that too. And I became less afraid of using color, and that's when it all came together. And to this day, I use all the colors. And as long as they're balanced in different parts of your canvas or your quilt, it works.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm curious, and you said it's interesting that someone whose work is so much about color and this wonderful, vibrant use of color, it's almost, it's kind of nice to hear that you used to be afraid of it, because that is I was just having a conversation the other day with some quilters who have been quilting maybe 5 or 10 years, and they were talking about how that's still difficult for them, and they still don't quite trust their ability to make great color choices. So I wish I'd had that. We talked before I talked to them, because I could say, well, even Vikki Pignatelli used to be afraid of color.
Absolutely. And what's more important even more important than the color, I think, is the contrast. So if you have a good value contrast that's light and dark,
Mhm.
boy, then it really shows up. And that's more important, you know, even I think, than the color. You have to have that contrast to show the difference, what you're trying to define. In other words, the subject needs to be defined from the background, and you need the contrast for that.
Well, I'm interested because you had a long career as a teacher. You're retired from teaching now, and I'm curious. Just talking, I don't know why I'm going off on the tangent of fear, except that so many of us, even very creative people, fear gets in the way of
Yes.
our process. And I'm wondering about the quilters who took your classes over the years. What were their biggest challenges? What did you really have to do to help them find their best creative selves?
To get over the fear, and not only technical fear, the fear of color, that was always a big one. The fear of not using enough contrast because they were always afraid because they think, well, that's too much of a light dark difference, but not when you stand away from it. They were always too close to that, too close to their work. And when you're looking at it at 18 inches and looking at it from 10 feet away, there's a big difference. So the big two fears were, you know, their fear of color, the fear of using too much contrast. But the other fear is that when you want to put your heart and your soul into it, a lot of people were afraid of that because they were afraid people would make fun of them, or they were too embarrassed to admit that there might be, you know, that they were sad or that they were struggling. It was the fear of putting yourself out there. And yet in all my career, I think I've only had, and I had thousands and thousands of people come to me. I think I only had 2 instances where that was a negative reaction. And obviously, those are pretty good odds.
Mhm.
So I think on that level, it was the fear of putting yourself out there. It takes courage, but it's worth it.
That's really interesting. That's what, and this, we sound like there are about 5 different questions I want to ask you now. And I very much want to get to sacred threads. But also, you seem, you know, what in the interviews I've read with that you've done and what have you, you're very insistent that quilts are art.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yet I feel so many quilt makers that I know are very resistant to the idea of themselves as artists. And I wonder if there's some kind of fear involved with that as well, actually saying, I'm an artist. Do you think, I'm curious why you think that might be? And also, do you agree with the writer Pat Minardi, who felt like quilts are the great American art form, which would make women some of the great American artists, women quilters some of the great American artists? That's a lot. I've just thrown a lot at you, but do what you will with it.
Um, well, first of all, artist is defined as anyone who creates. And that's the dictionary version. Anybody who creates is an artist, okay? The world views artist as someone who's successful, critically acclaimed, makes lots of money. I told you that I believe an artist is someone who uses their passion and their self-expression to convey, whether the quilt's going to be shown or not. They use their passion, they put their heart and their soul into it. That's an artist. Why people would be afraid? Um, well, sometimes artists, being called an artist had bad connotations. I mean, you know, they were someone who couldn't do anything else, or they were weird, or they were, you know, offbeat or whatever. Um, you know, so whether that has, I've always been proud to call myself an artist. And the reason being is because I feel it's an imitation of the creator, the great creator. I mean, I'm imitating, he's given me a gift to imitate him. And to me, that was just the biggest, amazing, what can I call it? You know, gift of all, the ability to do that. So
Mhm.
I've always been very proud to be an artist. I don't, unless it's a matter of courage, maybe they feel that they have something they have to live up to. Maybe they'll be downplayed or given bad reviews. None of that makes any difference. I've been given plenty of bad reviews by critics. You do your own thing because you
Mhm.
know in your heart. As
Well,
far as, as far as Minardi, I've never read her works. I really don't know what she has said, but it's my guess. I've read that quilting, actually, they've got reports that date back to ancient Egypt 5,000 years ago. But until just recently, recent history, um, it's always been used as something utilitarian. And because it was women's work to create these utilitarian things to keep warm and or to for clothing, it was never considered as genuine, verified art. However, with the Industrial Revolution that we had, the sewing machine came into being, and also other time-saving conveniences, and it gave women more time. And then with global trading, materials like fabric and whatever you needed for your craft became more readily available, giving women more access to it. And I think then women began to use all this for their self-expression. So I think this whole thing is within the last couple hundred years. And now women are using it for their self-expression. And yes, it is an art form, every bit as much as painting or sculpture or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I feel.
Well, thank you. I agree. I just like to have other people confirm. Let's talk about sacred threads, which keeping us on are on talking about art and spirituality. You are one of the founders. It's a biennial exhibit. Is that right? It's every 2 years. And it's almost 20 years old. It's established in 2001, I think.
Yes,
So,
actually, we began planning in 1990.
Yeah, those things take so long to get up. Well, why did you feel like this sort of exhibition was necessary? What compelled you to get it off the ground? To get Sacred Threads?
It actually started from a bad review. I had entered a quilt in Houston, and the year before I had won a big ribbon, first place actually in art. And so, I entered the next year, I entered my quilt, Creation of the Sun and Stars, which I truly believe was a divine inspiration, especially looking in retrospect. It came to me out of the blue in early morning, and I was able to draw it completely out, ready to start in like 2.5 hours. It was just incredible. It just flowed for me. It was the only quilt I ever made that I never had a setback or, had any problem with. And I will have creation upstairs. And so anyway, I entered this into Houston, and it came back with a terrible review. And
from a judge?
I'll explain what it was. While I was in Houston, because I did go that year, but while I was in Houston, I had been asked by two ladies, Susan Towner Larson and Barb Davis, who had just written a book called With Sacred Threads. And they had just released it. They had asked me to teach a 3-day non-denominational seminar on the correlation between quilt making and spirituality. And I had agreed to do that. While I was teaching, my quilt came back from Houston, and I finished the teaching. I came home, the box, my husband had brought the box inside, and I was exhausted. I was ready to just take a nap after finishing teaching. I opened up the box, and there was a judge's statement on top of it. And I thought, well, I have to see what the judges said. So I opened it up, and this quilt got a minus in innovation, a minus in color. It said there's only so much you can do with a spiral, and why don't you add touches to call it your own? And I looked at this, and I was just stunned beyond belief, because while I was a veteran of entering competitions, it was inane. It actually made no sense to me. And I even wondered at the moment, did they get the right quilt? Because I knew better. I knew the inspiration where this came from. I knew it was an amazing quilt in my heart. And I thought, where did this come from? And I thought, they don't get it. And part of the artist statement was that the ribbons were the hands of God coming from all parts of the universe. And it crossed my mind, could it be because it had a religious connotation? And I normally, when I get this kind of things, I look to see if there's truth, if I can learn anything. and then I disregard the rest. I thought, well, I'm just going to ignore that, and I'm going to take my nap because I was exhausted. Well, I could not rest. It was like a pinwheel in my mind that kept going around. I thought, could it have been the religious aspect? There's just my thought was there's just no safe place for these types of quilts that are spiritual based. And the next thought in my mind is you have to start something. And I was aghast. I said, there is no way. I have no experience whatsoever in running a show. Where's the money going to come from? How am I going to get the time to do this? No, I'm not going to do this. And it wouldn't go away. And it was like a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other. And they're arguing back and forth. It was kind of weird. And I thought, no, I'm not going to do this. And I thought, okay, all the details for Sacred Threads came to me. It should be called Sacred Threads. It should be every 2 years. My categories should be joy, inspiration, healing, grief, spiritual. It should be open to all people, not just, it should be open to the everyday woman, not just people who consider themselves artists. It should be open to all. And there should be books involved in this. And every detail came to me. And I was totally freaked out. And I thought, okay, even the people who should help me, and it was the people who were at this meeting, this workshop. So I thought, okay, I'm going to call them. As soon as they say no, I'm going to take my nap. So one by one, starting with the 2 authors, I called them. And they said, we think this is a great idea. And I thought, no. And all the way down the line, they said, we think it's wonderful. Yes, we'll do this. One lady said no. And I thought, finally, someone with some sense. And that was Wendy Benner. And she called me back 40 minutes later. She says, I don't know what's going on. I can't say no. I said, tell me about it. And so we all gathered, and that's how it started. We started that first show, and it became very clear to me later that I might have been the facilitator, but this was out of my hands because things just flowed into place. The money came, everything. It was amazing. That's how it started.
And has it always been at the same venue it's at now, which is this beautiful church out in Northern Virginia? It's a lovely place for the exhibit.
No, we were all from Reynoldsburg. Well, we were all from Columbus. And so we held it in Reynoldsburg for the first 5 shows. We started, the first show was 2001, and 2003, 5, 7, and 2009. And so the first shows were here, and it was held in a school cafeteria that we transformed with drapes. And, we had potted plants. A florist let us use her potted plants, and we had running fountains. And so we used a school those first 5 years. And then when Wendy's health started to be an issue, and I knew that she was the brains behind it. I might have been the dreamer, but she was the brains. She knew how to put all the quilts up properly. We decided we couldn't do it anymore. And that's when Lisa Ellis took it over and moved it to Virginia. And while we gave birth, she is the one who has raised the teenager and made it into a beautiful, beautiful exhibition that it is today. She has brought her charisma and her passion into it as well. She has kept the show almost identical to the vision that we had when we first started. And because that whole area is so much more congested, or populated is the word I'm looking for, they have a lot more people to come and see it. So they have a better attendance than we had here, which I'm so grateful for because it lives on.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell me about I guess for anyone who's not familiar with Sacred Threads, tell them what they would expect coming into the show. How is it different than your average? It's obviously it's bigger than a guild show, and it is, and the focus is on art quilts. But how would they experience Sacred Threads differently than a more typical quilt show? And what would their experience be like?
Okay, at that time, we wanted the focus to be on the emotional aspect of quilt making, because you know that when you're working on a quilt, it can be anywhere from a week to years. And a lot of your emotions, your blood, sweat, your tears goes into this work. Well, every show that was out there always either looked at the workmanship, how many stitches per inch or whatever, or the art aspect, that was the composition and so forth. We looked at, why does this quilt exist? What is the story behind this quilt? Why is it here? What's the meaning? What is behind it? What is the artist thinking? So by that means, our main focus when we look at this and when they choose the quilts that are going to go into this, as important as the work itself is, what is its impact emotionally? Does it speak to you emotionally? So the artist statement that's required is half as important. It takes up equal importance with what does the work look like. So when they walk in there, instead of and we've always been blessed, by the way, to always have really awesome work come through as far as workmanship, so, and color. So we're really lucky in that aspect. So when they come in, they can look at our categories, which will be spiritual, and some are religious or some are just spiritual, inspirational, healing, grief, peace, and brotherhood. And those are our main categories. So when you go in there, you can expect to stay 4 or 5 hours, because you're going to want to read these and they will touch your heart. And bring Kleenexes, because this is the only show I know where you can be so touched and so moved, you can be moved to tears.
Well, and I remember the first one I went to, I think was in, I'm going to say 2015. And particularly the grief section. I think there were warning signs, like this could really affect you. And it really was, it was beautiful, but it was hard. It was very emotionally draining. I mean, I would encourage anyone to go through that section, but you have to be prepared that it's not just look at that beautiful, Bethlehem star. It's a very different experience than that. And I still think about how, emotional that experience was.
Yeah, and while it's very emotional, it's also very cathartic for the quilt maker, because when you put yourself into it, a lot of that grief, and this is why it's healing for the quilt maker, a lot of that grief that's being bottled up inside of you is being released onto the canvas of the quilt, or the quilt top, and so you're bringing it from the inside out, and that helps the healing process.
And obviously here at the Quilt Alliance, we're all about documenting quilts and quilt stories. And so, of course, I very much appreciate being able to read the story of the quilt next to the quilts. I think that increases the impact. And I do want to say that the wonderful Lisa Ellis is on the Quilt Alliance board, and we're very proud of her. So I just want to make that official statement here in the interview. But it's an amazing show. And and there's really nothing else like it.
No, there wasn't then, and there isn't now.
Yeah.
Not like this. It is a truly amazing show. It had a reason. It had a reason to be.
Well, you have again a long career as a teacher, and I'm sure you have affected many people's lives emotionally and creatively. But you retired 2 years ago. Is that right? Longer than that?
I did retire officially at the end of, 16, I believe. But I did teach a class in Alabama earlier in March, and I love my students. I miss the teaching, I truly do. Physically, with my husband and I and traveling, it's been a little bit difficult, but I love the teaching experience. I love being with people. I love the electricity that's in the classroom when people are creating. They might learn from me, but I also learn from them. I was always jealous when I was a teacher, because they were having fun creating and I was not creating. And you know, for a true creative, that's difficult. When you cannot have the time to create it, it's frustrating.
Right.
Oh,
Well,
I always was jealous. I always wanted to get in there and play too.
now that you are mostly retired, although with an occasional lapse, it sounds like, how has your life as a quilter changed, as an artist changed?
I have not had the time to create, which is very frustrating. We have, I think I had another purpose as well. I've got a granddaughter who is a single mom with 2 children, and she's putting herself through nursing school. So we have been babysitting a lot for the 4-year-old, and it's rewarding too, but that doesn't leave a lot of time for creating. I'm also been trying to downsize the house, which takes a lot of time and effort. But boy, I'm sure looking forward to being creative again as soon as all of this is taken care of. So,
And Vicki, are you telling us that you are a great grandmother?
yes, I am.
Wow.
I have, I have 2 great grandchildren. I can't believe
I would
either.
not look at you and think, oh, great grandmother, that's marvelous. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, what we're going to do now is we are going to look at some of your quilts, and perhaps you can tell us some of your own quilt stories. So let's go upstairs.
I'm Vikki Pignatelli, and we are in what used to be my workroom. We are in process of moving, downsizing, and it's empty now, but I'll kind of give you an idea of what was what. This was a window here where my quilt, Creation of the Sun and Stars, is now. Not necessarily the best choice I would have had, but this was the only spare. As my son, I took it over, and it became my workroom. My sewing machine was over here. I had a pegboard with all my tools over here. And over here, you can see what is left of my stash. I've donated quite a bit of it to charity at this point, but as you can see, I still have plenty of fabric left.
Vicki, can I ask you? Let me ask you a question about your fabric. I mean, I assume you use cotton, but do you get hand-dyed fabric? Do you make your own fabric? I'm not asking you to endorse a particular fabric brand, but I'm curious about what kind of fabrics do you use for your quilts?
Almost exclusively now, the past few quilts that I've done, almost exclusively hand dyes. And I like hand dyes because it seems like every square inch, you have a different palette. It's not repetitive. So I like to pick and choose and blend colors with each other. So I can use almost 200 different fabrics in a quilt. And I tend to blend colors by lack of contrast. So the human eye just flows from one to the other, and you get a painterly look when you use hand dyes. So while I do have some batiks and even some solid fabrics down there, I don't use those nearly as much as the hand dyes. So those I will definitely keep for all of my quilting in the future.
And do you dye your own fabric, or are you buying from people who are doing the hand dyes?
There's just not enough hours in the day, and so I usually end up buying. I have tried my hand at dyeing, but like I said, it's a time constraint, and believe me, it's cheaper for me to buy what I want. And the fabrics that speak to me, I get those instead. So I usually buy.
Okay, just curious. People will want to know.
Okay. All right, and then I have my quilts that I will tell you about. This one is called Passages of the Spirit. And the whole idea behind Passages of the Spirit is, well, first of all, I want to show that in the background here, you have a lot of jagged shapes. And jagged shapes usually denote disharmony, trials, tribulations, and so forth. And this quilt is almost exclusively full of symbolism. So the darkness also is somber, and the different colors are representative. So dark blue would be sorrow, and the purple, ignorance, anger for the red. The gray over here would be anxiety, and hopelessness for the dark green. And that at some point, our spirits will be released and we will be pure spirits, which are denoted by pure color, whereas these are very toned and dark. This is pure color of serenity, wisdom, love, joy, and hope. Now in the center of the quilt, you see a lot of very smooth or curved shapes. Curved shapes denote peace, harmony, unity. And I've used a lot of gold in here, and that denotes God. And if you notice, the spirits' faces are in gold because they are reflecting, the pure spirits are reflecting God in this. So this was, it's my husband's favorite quilt, and but that's the story behind it. And the back, a lot of times I put backs on my quilts, and the back also has the trials and tribulations, but the circle of gold, and it's hard to see on this, but there is a circle of gold that represents God, which is superimposed on top of the trials and tribulations. And then I've quilted the center with curves, and I use 7 different colors of gold, I believe, on this. And then the outside is quilted with zigzag lines over in here. And so the quilting continues the symbolism in that quilt.
Vicki, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm curious about your process. Do these quilts start out as sketches? There's so much energy, but I'm assuming that you don't make them improvisationally, but perhaps you do. What is your process?
Okay, on this particular quilt, I had the spirits, and I did draw the spirits. I positioned them where I wanted it, but the rest of it was improvisational.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It just has such an energy coming out of it that sometimes improvised quilts do have. You see so much of the creative energy on the quilt or coming from the quilt, and I really feel that with this one.
This one, it's got some gorgeous stitching. Denny, can you come close to see some of the stitching in some of this? Down here especially, and where the spirit of wisdom is.
And so, do you quilt your own quilts?
Yes, I do. I do quilt my own quilts.
That's beautiful.
That's not my favorite part. My favorite part is obviously putting them together. I love the color part, and I could make quilt tops all day long, but I do quilt my own. Now this one over here is Creation of the Sun and Stars. This is what started Sacred Threads. I don't know if you can see the color in this. The background does change from purple to green to blue to purple to blue to purple to green. So there's just every color in there. This is called, again, Creation of the Sun and Stars. The yellow ribbons are the hands of the creator coming from all parts of the universe or the quilt and forming the sun. And as the sun is being born, and this is the sun right here, it is spinning and throwing off flames and fire, and those are turning into dancing, joyful stars. Every artist has a favorite. This one is my favorite. I love this quilt.
This was your first quilt of this sort. That's what you were saying. Were you surprised by it? It's a beautiful quilt. It's such a powerful quilt. Were you surprised when you made it?
I don't know that surprised is the word. Overjoyed. I was thrilled. I was very pleased with it. I know where the inspiration came from, and I felt it was a gift to me. That's why I was so stunned when I got the bad review. And in retrospect, a few years later, I thought to myself, it's a good thing that happened. It had a purpose. Otherwise, I would have never been moved as I was to start such a show. and a show that's touched so many thousands of people. So it had a purpose of being.
Mm-hmm. Oh, certainly.
Yeah. So my first, I would say, spiritual quilt, and my first original quilt is Breaking Point. This is what started my career, actually. This came right after my husband, Denny, had a bout with cancer. And I was feeling very full of angst and anxiety at that time, of course. And as you can see, Denny's doing fine. But at that time, it was very stressful, not only with him, but we had a teenage girl who was giving us some grief. And she's doing fine too. But you go through a lot at that point. And so I thought I need to make a healing quilt. So basically in this one, I am the tree, and I'm being buffeted by life storms the same way that nature buffets trees outside. The actual inspiration for this came after I saw a tree in our front yard going through a really bad spring storm. And as I was watching it, I thought, I feel like that tree. And immediately I thought, oh my golly, because the tree is being buffeted by nature storms. At the same time, I feel I'm being buffeted by life storms. And so that's what started it. And I've always identified with trees. So a lot of times when I have a tree in my quilts, I am the tree in the quilt. So this is what started. You can look at it. You can see the angst in it. You can see the chaos, and that it, because what is in you is coming out of you. And that's what happened.
And is this your first art quilt period?
Yes.
And as you were making it, did you feel like, I know what I'm doing, and it was just coming, through you? Or did you struggle at all since you were transitioning from a different kind of quilt?
I had no idea what I was doing. In fact, this is the quilt that I started to, I wanted to do all these curves, and I conventionally started to try to put two pieces together, and there was just no way that I was going to get this ever done. I thought there's got to be an easier way. And so I thought if I could just piece it from the top. So I actually took my storm door down, and I kind of straddled it between two cafeteria tables, and I put a light underneath, and I found out really quick I needed some kind of a foundation. So I used a piece of muslin, and I was able to see through my pattern, and then I was able to piece from the top. And I was able to finish it somehow. And I sent it away to Quilter's newsletter, and they had a thing called the Quilting Bee, and every day Quilter could send a picture and they would print it. And I sent the picture in, and because here I am a new quilter, what do I know? I sent it in, and I thought, what do I have to lose? And that's one of my main mantras. And they came back, they would like to print it, and they also wanted to know how I put it together. And I thought, you got to be kidding. I can't tell people to take their storm door down. And so I went back to the drawing table and came up with the technique that I use now. And luckily, you don't need your storm door. So this started my career in just by trial and error, figuring out what I needed to do. So yeah, this started it. And this has a back too. And I don't know if you can see it, but there's two bolts of lightning coming from the top. And one represents my husband, the cancer that struck my husband. And the other one represents the cancer that did take my mother's life about 10 years earlier than that. So it had symbolism on the front and the back as well. But that's what started my career.
That's exciting. Yeah, beautiful.
This one is called Portrait of My Soul. The inspiration for this one came at a church service on a Saturday night. And I was daydreaming, and I envisioned almost a ball of energy just moving and vibrating and going out, and very colorful. And I kind of interpreted that to be the emotions that I was feeling. So if you notice, I've got a lot of gold in here, and it's at dead center of the quilt. And that, again, that represents God. but also the color is symbolic. And the yellow is the joy that's in there, and the blue is some serenity. There's some fabric in here that is anxiety, such as this one, and there's one with zigzags in it. That's anxiety. A touch of depression over here, but it just is all the emotions that are churning within me. And so this one, again, is the one that I put into Houston, into IQA. This one won first place in Art Large. And this one also had a backing to it as well, called A Circle of Emotions. And then I used all kinds of different colors of bobbin threads on the back of this as well. So this one was a special quilt. This is the one I entered and won, and that's the second one I entered and with a bad review. But yeah, I'm very pleased with this quilt as well. But this is a portrait of my soul.
It's beautiful.
The one in here that I want to show you, I don't know if you can see this. This is engulfed. And this, I was known for actually putting holes or openings in my quilt. And this has 15 different openings. Talk about a death wish. Oh my God, I'll never do that again. Anyway, I just knew that I wanted to make this quilt, that it was on fire. It was going to be a silhouette. I tried to make it all dark, but it didn't want to be all dark as a silhouette would be. It always had the color in it, but I had no clue, because usually a lot of times when I have an inspiration, there's something behind it, something that I'm thinking of that I want to do. I didn't know why I felt so compelled to make this quilt. And I actually finished it, and you can see it's like die cut, and there's even holes down here and here. And it wasn't until about a month after I finished Engulfed that I was in the shower, and I was thinking, all of a sudden it hit me that, remember when I told you that what's in you comes out into your work, whether you know it or not, subconsciously it just comes out if you're working from the heart. I realized how burned out I had been. I was very burned out. Look at the body language of this tree. I had the weight of the world on my shoulders, burned out with the flames. I realized this was a self-portrait, and I thought to myself, oh my golly, do I need some kind of a vacation? I couldn't believe this is what was coming out of me. This is what was in me. And ironically, later that year, we went to visit my daughter who lives in Las Vegas, and we went to Bryce Canyon, and we were hiking around the rim, and unbelievably, we saw a tree that could have been the inspiration for this. It was actually on the edge of the cliff, and it was leaning over the cliff. It had been on fire. The bottom had been burned. It was almost the exact inspiration. And that is the first time I said, first I made the quilt and then saw the inspiration for it. That was my self-portrait at that time. Hopefully I'm not that burned out anymore. This is my latest quilt. This is the one that was just in the Sacred Threads 2019 show. And this is called The Autumn of Life. And I'm 70 now. And as you get older, I think you tend to, how do I describe it? There's a lot, it seems like there's a lot of drama in your life, more so than maybe when you're younger. I mean, it can be fears of your health, being left alone. There's just a lot of drama that goes on. There's also beauty you feel in your life. And what I've tried to do is capture not only the beauty that's in there, but some of the drama that's there as well. So that is the whole concept behind this particular quilt. I love the way it turned out. It's a gorgeous quilt. It's quite tall. As you can see, I have 8-foot ceilings.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the quilt is just about 7 feet tall. So it's a big quilt.
It's amazing in terms of the light in the quilt. I mean, how that light draws you to the center. And I also love the borders and how they go along with the with what's going on inside of the quilt. But that use of light is just stunning.
I could design quilts all day long. I absolutely love working with the color to get the effect that I want. And
I mean, what's surprising to me is that you can get that kind of light with fabric. You know, that you can bring that quality of light to a quilt. That, I mean, it feels, it's a light that feels almost lifelike, as though the quilt was actually shining too. It's tremendous.
yeah, this is using a lot of the lack of contrast to get the color gradations that you want. And that's why sometimes it can take me almost 45 minutes to pick out one fabric to put in a quilt, because I know which fabrics I have in my mind, and I know exactly what I'm looking for. And I'm so involved that I'm always looking for the right piece that I want. And hand dyes can give me that, whereas a commercial print fabric is not going to do it. But like, for instance, with Creation of the Sun and Stars, I can move from dark to light. And I do that by using basically here the same colors or colors that are very similar to blend from one to the next, so that your eye doesn't see that. Yeah, there's a difference in the actual color, but your eye just flows over it instead. So you get the movement by using color in that way through lack of contrast. So for the background, lack of contrast, but you definitely, for the foreground, for the subject, you want that high contrast between that, so it stands out and you get that pop. So, and as I said, I am a self-taught artist. These are things I learned from trial and error and from being blessed with the gift of loving color. So, but that's basically some of the different quilts that I've, oh, one more to show you. I forgot about this little guy. This one, I also thought I'd try my hand at something a little bit more abstract. And this is my version of a log cabin. Yeah, basically, if you look closely, yeah, you can see some log cabin in there. But I also played with some manipulations by accordion pleating a piece of lame fabric and then trying to get balance by tucking little pieces of the correct fabric that I wanted to balance in the little pleat that was created by that. So yeah, a lot of fun, but that's my log cabin. So it was just one of the fun things that I found out is one of my favorite things. So, but basically this is my workroom, or what was my workroom. I'm looking forward to when we get a condo or whatever, is creating a new workroom that I can use. So that's, do you have any questions, Frances?
Well, yes, I have a million questions. We probably don't have time for them all. I just
stopped again.
I have your book here, Nurture Creative Spirit. If someone reads your book, will they an understanding of how your creative process? Because I'm just fascinated by how you make these quilts. They're stunning works of art. I know a lot of people watching our process people, so I'm curious how we can learn more about your process, and if the book, if Nurture Your Creative Spirit will help us understand more how you're making these amazing works.
And basically freeing yourself to listen to your inspirations and act on them. So it was more of a motivational, inspirational book. Okay, with Nurture Your Creative Spirit, it's not a technical book. You won't find anything about the calories of how to do it. It is intended mostly, it's an inspirational motivation book. But by reading it, you'll learn the stories and the inspirations behind all my quilts that I had made up until the time it was published. You will learn what makes me tick, what my thinking was, and
why I created what I did, or how I created what I did. It's more or less trying to free yourself to make your own creative journey with, you know, your own outlook on life and your own life's experiences. So it's not technical, but hopefully motivational.
Oh, well, wonderful. Well, I want to thank you for sharing quilts with us and your time with us. These are, again, amazing works of art. And I was so happy. I've been so happy when I've been able to see them live and in person, because then you really do experience that color and that energy that comes from them. You have given such a wonderful thing, and of your given of yourself, and given us so many great works of art to look at and to enjoy. So thank you for that. Thank you so much for talking to us, and for everything that you've done, from your teaching and your books to Sacred Threads and your quilts. So thank you for being part of StoryBee. It has been just so lovely to talk to you today.
Frances, thank you so much. It's been a joy to talk to you, and I'm always thrilled to share the stories of my quilts and my work. So I appreciate it, and it's been my pleasure. Thank you.
It's great talking to you. I hope that we will, our paths will cross again soon. So take care, Vikki. Thanks again.
Okay, bye-bye now.
Bye.